Good afternoon, everyone. I hope we are good and have had a good day and enjoyed our lunch. Welcome to this session, specifically looking at Gen Z in terms of the cyberspace and safety online. Of course, to a great extent, we might be a bit more biased towards online safety for children, mainly because this is the upcoming generation and they are getting into technology faster than we did when we started getting into it. And I'm sure almost all of us can attest that it's a period where cybercrime is on the rise, but even the number of children that are being exposed to different online information and technology are more susceptible to cybercrime or other dangers that are found online. And the need to actually have them protected becomes critical, even in these discussions when we're talking about how internet should be governed. For some, they've taken an extreme of restricting how children access the internet, especially if they're given access. But for some who've taken it to the extra mile, they've actually restricted internet access for children. But we cannot avoid the fact that even children need to have access to the internet. Not so. I'm sure almost all of us can agree. So the fact that we are looking at children having access with the growth of technology, which is critical to development of every society, it becomes then important that we actually consider the safety of children online. And so as a way of beginning, before I introduce our speakers, I just want to pick a few thoughts from everyone in the room. What's your brief take on what online safety would look like from your perspective? Maybe let me just have 2 or 3 people to just share their thoughts on that before I introduce the speakers. Anyone? What does online safety for children in this case would mean to you? Anyone? Or maybe even from those that are participating online. Yeah? Sure.
Sorry, I don't know if I can participate in this topic, but this is a very important thing. So the most important thing, I think, is the restriction of the sexual content to the children, which is the most affecting things to them. So this is my contribution.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else? What are your thoughts? What would online child safety look like for you, in your view? Yeah, sure, you can go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I agree. I think there are certain topics that worry us as adults in particular. But one thing that I think about a great deal is I think as adults, both as parents, I think as people that work in this space, we tend to make a differentiation between online and offline. And I think for kids, that is a somewhat superficial. That is somewhat of a superficial bifurcation. For them, there is not necessarily this like online or offline. For them, it's just life, and they are increasingly living their lives in digital spaces all of the time. And so I think, in many ways, we need to think of online in much the same way that we think about offline, and try not to create such a differentiation in online or offline.
Wow, thank you so much. Maybe let me have one last person, then we can move on. Ma'am? Yeah.
I have a kid of 8 years. I wish I could have an online world where he will not be able to find any game which is engage in fighting, and which is asking him to buy something and to buy some Robux or something like that, and there are less advertisement for more games. It is most probably, I am thinking that it is making my child disintegrated.
Wow, that's quite interesting. So there are literally a lot of different views about what online safety could look like, especially for the development of children. I'm Levis Yansege from the Internet Society Zambia chapter, and one of the things that I'm biased to is Internet for Education, with specifically access and connectivity for children because of the benefit that the internet brought for me when I was growing up. And so today we're having a session on Generation Z in the cyberspace? Are we safe online? And so as a way of beginning, allow me to introduce our speakers for today. We have 3, if not 2, online, and we have 3 right in this room. So let me start by asking them to introduce themselves. I'll start with Jennifer. You could introduce yourself.
Always. Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Chung. You might have seen me around the venue this morning, a few days ago as well. But for this particular session, I'm putting on the hat of the Secretary General of .Kids Foundation. And .Kids is the only child-centric internet top-level domain. And it is, you'll hear more about what .Kids is all about in a little bit.
All right, thank you. While we're doing the introduction, I've been asked by the technical team that maybe people that are seated at the far end on my left, they could also move this side so that the room doesn't look empty, as well as for easy coordination of the footage. So I don't know if we could maybe starting from somewhere midway, you could maybe probably move this side. All right, thank you. I'll ask, the next person is Aris. Maybe you could also introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hello. Yay.
Okay. I think
Hello. Oh, yeah. Okay. Am I being heard? So hello and good afternoon to each and everyone. I am Aris Ignacio, and I am an academician by heart. And my nature is I'm connected with a university in the Philippines, and more often than not, I concentrate more on ICT technology, and I'm a technical person by nature, and I do teach students, more specifically in the undergraduate level and also the graduate level. And I do involve myself with regards to some of, you know, internet governance issues related to education, and not only to education, but also to technology as well.
Wow,
That's it.
that's an awesome one. Then let me allow 2 speakers online to introduce themselves. Then I'll allow 1 more person who is in the room to introduce herself. I don't know if Pavo is in the meeting. You could also introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon to everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, perfect. So good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm Pavel, originally from Bangladesh, but I'm actually based in Thailand. So unfortunately couldn't make it to the IGF this year, but fingers crossed we make it there next year. Well, what am I doing? Okay, right now I'm working as a program officer and as the AP Star Secretariat here at the Internet Education and Research Lab in the university in which I'm working. And I also graduated from this university based in Bangkok. And I have a passion for internet governance issues, and I like to advocate for issues that are very close to my heart. And of course, this online child safety being one of these issues that I have been advocating for quite some time. So it would be interesting to hear everyone's views on this as well. That's all for me.
All right, thank you, Pavo. And then next from the online people, I'll ask Andre to introduce himself. Andre?
Yes, hello. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Andrei Lenikov, and I represent the domain registry.deti, and I'm a public relations specialist. And I think that the protection of children on the internet is very, very important things, because children have a fragile, informed psyche. But it is wrong to simply prohibit children from using the internet, and we need to teach them to use it safely. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Andre. And lastly, among the speakers that we have, just a small recognition. Maurice couldn't join in unless otherwise. But for the last speaker that we have in the room, it's Arevik. I'll also ask her to introduce herself.
Good morning, good afternoon. It's okay. Do you hear me? Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for everyone who's here and online. So my name is Arevik Martirosyan. I'm a researcher at the Diplomatic Academy of the Russian Foreign Minister. head of the Youth Educational and Scientific Project, International Information Security School. You may be heard about it. We have accreditation at United Nations Open Ed Working Group. And I'm also IGF Ambassador 2022. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so I'm informed that Maurice is online. So maybe, Maurice, you can also introduce yourself, then we can proceed.
Sure, absolutely. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Very simply, my hat for today is the CEO of DataWorks Communications, and I have over 10 years experience in youth development and advocating also over the years for the safety of children online and making sure that their voices are heard as well. I have a background in psychology, gender studies, as well as communication. So I come from all of these various backgrounds and hats when it comes to addressing youth development, youth online safety, and children online safety as well. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Maurice. So now let's get into the discussion. We talk about online safety. Probably in this very room, there are a lot of definitions based on what we've come across or the dangers we've been exposed to, and so on and so forth. But allow me to get maybe a perspective as well of bringing this discussion together from the participants. I'll ask probably almost all of you to just give your perspective on what is child online safety or online child safety. Let me start with Arevik.
Okay, I think that it is a complex policy, and when we speak about children protection online, we should mention that it shouldn't be also just the responsibility of their parents. It should be also the zone of responsibility of government, of civil society, of scientific community, and there is not just one side that should be responsible. All our society is responsible, and we should take more steps to make the internet more safe for children.
All right, thank you. Let me move to Jennifer. What's your perspective on child online safety?
Sure, thank you, Levi. Maybe I'll speak a little bit on the standpoint of, I guess, the domain namespace. I think a lot of people I heard from the participants and also from my esteemed panelists that child online safety is a very, very complex thing that requires a lot of different stakeholders. It requires education. It requires, especially now speaking from the tech community side, a lot of platforms have a lot of responsibility since children are online a lot. Oh, and we have a little bit of a tech issue in the room, and we have the lights back on. So it's very imperative for us to understand, to not just limit certain types of content, which is clear. There is questionable content, extreme violence, there's pornography, things that should not be available to children under a certain age, of course. But at the other end of things, it is very important to realize that they need to be able to express themselves, to be able to create content that is appropriate for themselves, to be able to learn and take the benefits of what internet can bring to their education and development of children. So from the tech community standpoint, there is kind of a double-edged sword here. We need to allow to give them a space for them to develop and learn in a safe environment, and we also need to be very responsive to any abuse, any questionable materials, and this takes a lot of coordination with law enforcement. This takes a lot of coordination with trusted partners, trusted notifiers, and of course takes a lot of coordination with child rights organizations and specific ones like Internet Watch Foundation, who are experts in taking down CSAM, which is child sexual abuse materials. So it does require quite a complex stance, but I think we're all here in this room and also online as well to try to make this happen and try to make this work.
All right, let me shift a bit online before we get back to the room. Let me pick on Maurice and Pavel. What's your perspective on online child safety? How do you look at it? Maybe Maurice can start, then Pavel can come in.
Thank you. Well, really, I love starting with a very simplified definition and making sure that we are all on the same page in the room. I know that we have varied experiences and backgrounds represented in terms of our audience today. So for everyone in the room, just online safety very simply can be understood as, you know, the frameworks, the policies, the regulations that are focused on making sure that online engagement for children is done safely, is done securely, and that our children and also our youth are in no way exploited, taken advantage of, or end up losing their lives because of being active in the internet ecosystem and online. We all know that the internet with mobile phones and other electronic media formats has provided our children and our young people with levels of access to information, to culture, to communication and entertainment that 20 years ago we would have never imagined would be possible. So now we are faced with a myriad of challenges, as Jennifer also beautifully outlined for you. And we're grappling with this. So essentially what it is, when we look at the definition of online safety for children, it's really just looking at the various frameworks, the various policies, the various regulations that we are discussing, putting in place and formulating and continuously updating to make sure that our young people and children are not exploited when they do engage in the internet space.
All right, thank you. Pavel, your tech.
Thank you, Levi, and thank you to all my esteemed panelists as well for the different definitions and the different backgrounds they're coming from. And I want to come from the background of the risks and responsibilities. So when we say child online safety, we can say it's the risks to the children and young people of having abusive images of them shared on the internet, of being groomed or lured into sexual conversations or exploitation by adult offenders. And also we also talk about cyberbullying, and we talk about sexual harassment online. So these are all what comes under the umbrella of when we talk about child online safety. Now, how do we tackle these crimes against children? Because you could say that just a single angle is ineffective. So I would say that to systematically protect children, it is up to legislators, regulators, the law enforcement organizations, social service providers, teachers, educators, parents, and of course, the private sector. We have to work together because single-handedly, no one's going to make it work. And yes, it's true that in the modern age, there are a lot of kids who are capable when it comes to looking at the risks that are presented to them to the internet. I would like to give them that advantage that yes, kids today are quite smart, but at the end of the day, they are kids, and despite their agency, we shouldn't overestimate the children's capacity for self-defense. And they are children after all, so adults are ultimately responsible for creating a system that guarantees that children's fair and equal access to the internet, and so that they have fair and equal access to the internet while they are safe at the same time. I've had this conversation with some older generations. So you know what they always say, they're like, oh, kids today shouldn't be having smartphones. You know, it's the parents' fault for spoiling their kids, etc., etc. Or, you know, or something even like, oh, you know, in my time, we just grew up fine without technology. And I'm like, well, you know, spoiler alert, technology is here now and it's here to stay. So we gotta, you know, adapt to it. And of course, we have to also understand that according to the Convention to the Rights of Children, which is by the UN, all children have fundamental rights and access to information, participation, leisure, play, whatever they want to access, whether it's offline or online. And it is our collective responsibility to guarantee that those rights of children, whether they are in the digital or physical environments, are protected. That's for me.
All right, thank you. Let me quickly get the thoughts of what online child safety would mean from Iris, and then we can move to the next part of our conversation and discussion. Iris.
Okay, thank you, Levi. Uh, it's really tough to give a definition if you're the last one who's going to give one. Because yeah, but it's okay. I would love it as last. But it's really tough. It's really a complex idea, and as you could see, everyone has mentioned all the aspects, all the things that needs to be included there, and all the topics that are already there. But I'm going to look at it in an academic perspective and in a more simpler one, wherein when we talk about online child safety, we are going to talk about more on providing awareness to people. Awareness that they need to know in order for them to move forward. Because without awareness, they would not be able to know on how to do things, how we are going to craft policies, how we are going to do tech, for example, to protect them, and so on and so forth. And we all know that if we are going to provide this to our children, we also need to know on what range are we looking at. Because we are not only looking at kids here, but we are also looking at people who are young adults as well, adolescent age. Because we cannot, you know, guarantee their safety also as of this moment. Because there are a lot, maybe some of, the races that, some people around the world do have this um, perception that these adolescent ones who are in the proper age already can think straight. But other people around the world, especially in some parts of the world that doesn't really have an advanced type of technology to deal with, and they do have that certain point that they're kind of lost, and they cling on technology, and that is what we need to look into. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. So having heard the different perspectives on what child online safety would look like, it looks like it's not a single approach to ensuring this safety. As a result, it brings in different stakeholders at play and different rules from different stakeholders in the whole tech space. Now, my current question gets to be about, are there any current frameworks that are ensuring that there's actually online child safety? Let me start with you, Jennifer, again, before I get to Iris.
Okay. Thank you, Levi. I guess bringing back to what I know, there are national frameworks, but if you're looking, of course, we're at the UN IGF. We look at the United Nations Convention on the Right of the Child. I think that is the instrument from where a lot of national jurisdictions take that kind of framework and then codify it into regulation and law. And speaking actually really from the perspective of .kids being an internet namespace, a top-level domain, we're not a platform, we're not a content provider, but it is an internet top-level domain where people can create content, where people can have a domain name and create content. And the most important part when we're thinking about policies and frameworks in a space that is created specifically for children, and when I'm talking about children, I'm talking about, according to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, any person under the age of 18. So, as Aris has mentioned, there is a sliding scale, both in terms of maturity going through the actual physical age of the child or young person, and also there's a cultural aspect of it. In Asia, in Africa, in Europe, in Americas, it is quite different what is appropriate or what is the children or the young people are exposed to. For .kids in particular, we've created a set of guiding principles, and really it's based on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, but it is to create and foster an online space with the kid's best interests at heart. But what does that actually mean? It really means that there are certain types of content that should not be in this space. Types of content such as child abuse images, type of content such as extreme violence, things like alcohol and tobacco, which is legal for adults above the age of majority, but not legal for children under the age of 18, and depending on whatever jurisdiction you're looking at. Things like drugs and substance abuse, child labor, trafficking, and soldiers, and also things like that should not be there. And it's quite interesting for us to look at it in this standpoint, because when you're looking at other parts of the internet namespace, such as .com, .org, other things like even like .asia, there's no such restriction on this particular type of content because we're not really in the business of trying to restrict content. That is more on the side of things like platform providers such as Facebook and Meta and other things like that. But if you are looking at to create a safe space, we need to make sure there are guardrails in place. That's not only you create the policies where these are guardrails there, you also create a way for people to report abuse. So that I think is very important. Having the policies set in place, having guardrails, and having a channel from which these abuses can be reported, and also a periodic review of such frameworks. Periodic review from people that are experts in child rights organizations, but also the agency of children themselves. They are quite sophisticated in certain ways to know what types of content which would be desirable or educational to them, and they also need to have the agency to have a say in what they would like to see, what they would like to create. There's a lot of kids and young people who are content creators now on different platforms, on their own website. So balancing that in the framework is quite essential, I think.
Awesome. Let me take a view of from the academic perspective, Aris. Are there some of the best practices with regard maybe to regional biases with regard to making sure that there is online child safety?
Okay, being in the academic sector, there are a lot of frameworks that are out there, but I would like to emphasize and concentrate more on digital competencies, because digital competencies can lead you to providing more security, and maybe students or maybe the young ones would be able to know on how to protect themselves, because that is one thing that we need to look into. People need to know how to protect themselves. So that is really the first thing. And we must really first think about on how we are going to obtain this. So there are a lot of frameworks out there, and with regards to digital competency, especially the one that was crafted by the European Union, which is the DIGCOM framework. And also there are other digital competencies out there with regards to the framework. For example, I think the International Society for Technology and Education is another thing, which concentrates more on the younger ones, which is the K-12 portion, or the K-12 levels, wherein all of those have been crafted, and for each and every level, from the beginner's point of view, learners who are beginning to learn, up until the point that they were able to know what is right and what is wrong based on the standards that was created. And that is encompassing everything. This would develop the skills, not only the skills, the awareness also, and on how they would be able to roam around with regards to how technology is being used, how would they be responsible in utilizing technology with regards to anything that they would do moving forward. So those are quite some of the frameworks that maybe schools or even organizations might look into and maybe integrate it within their own.
Okay, thank you, Aris. Let me get to two people online. No, three actually. Let me get the thoughts on some of the current frameworks. If possible, maybe you could speak bias towards the region that you're representing. I think that would be great, or the sector that you're representing. Let me start with Maurice, then Pavo can come up, and then Andre. Maurice?
Thank you. I actually wanted to they've mentioned quite a bit on the frameworks as well. And what is important here is the cross-sectional and cross-regional work and advocacy groups that actually have come up from these and that contribute to these frameworks as well. And this is one of the important best practices, which is also important that we focus on as part of the overall question that we're looking at. So let me also just shed a few lights on that. I'll mention that for some of the organizations that have been involved in developing these frameworks and that have done fantastic work when it comes to the cross-sectional and cross-regional work and collaborations, has been the Dynamic Coalition on Children's Rights in the Digital Environment. As we know, they are the Dynamic Coalition, part of the Internet Governance Body or ecosystem, as some of you may know, and many of you now have been made aware of. Other cross-regional groups that I've come across that I've been very happy with in terms of the frameworks that they've employed as well to ensure all the voices in the multi-stakeholder model is taken into consideration when looking at online child safety regulations and policies, has also been the Internet Society Special Interest Groups. You can, and standing groups as well now, that has been updated. So please take a look at online safety, the online safety group, as well as the Internet for Education group. And then one of the other best organizations and kind of movements that are focused also on developing key frameworks and collaborating has been the National Children's Rights I'm gonna say this properly, Intersectoral Coordination Committee. So the National Children's Rights Intersectional Coordination Committee is established to really facilitate collaboration between government and civil society organizations, right? So the NCRICC consists of your government, your civil society organizations, which are you recognize as key partners in overseeing the protection and the promotion of our children's rights online. I want to quickly come back to what has been achieved through this and in terms of best practices and what it has birthed. When I just look at the Dynamic Coalition on Children's Rights in the Digital Environment, which is, again, the Dynamic Coalition that focuses on children's online safety within the framework of the internet governance ecosystem that we have. They have actually been able to get in the voices of 60 individual and organizational members from civil society, private sector, academia, and government, and this is across the world. The individual outputs of these individuals and organizations are actually quite considerable, and it ranges from service delivery, law and policy development and implementation, goodness, also training, research, and advocacy aspects is taken, and all of this, right, is done with the goal of understanding, promoting, and protecting children's broad and diverse rights in relation to the digital environment. So yes, there's some work being done regionally, but there's been a shift as well to a more cross-regional approach and collaborative effort, right? And for time, I'm going to leave it there, and then I'll contribute a bit further on this and expand as we continue with the discussion.
All right, thank you, Maurice. Pavel, your take, maybe briefly.
Yeah, I actually won't take too much of the time on this because I feel that most of the technicalities of the frameworks have already been spoken for. So I guess I would just say that, the frameworks, the governments have already tended to tackle online related sexual exploitation and abuse with an emphasis on building the architecture to protect and rescue children, establishing legislation, pursuing and prosecuting abusers, raising awareness, reducing harm, et cetera, And yes, these are essential components to the framework as a protection response. Internationally, however, progress is quite patchy. I'm talking about legal jurisdictions that Jennifer mentioned a bit about, because we fail to enact legislation sufficient to combat child abuse images, especially, or laws to criminalize grooming, for example. And finally, of course, there is a lack of awareness amongst parents and agencies with child protection responsibilities, because this is what we should be building the framework around. If I were to give an example from where I'm from, in Bangladesh, for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of kids who really didn't know who didn't really use the internet as much before finally got on the internet and were obviously a victim, or a lot of kids were a victim of inappropriate messages, cyber harassment, and they told their parents about it, but their parents didn't know what to do, and there was no law in place on how does how does a parent help their child in this aspect? Because they don't have that prior knowledge either, because it is such a new thing to them, not being online during this whole time. So yeah, if this could be a priority for policymakers and build a framework around that, then that would be my suggestion.
All right, let me get Andre and then get back to the room as we proceed to the next part. So the main question is, what are the current frameworks and the best practices in ensuring child online safety? Probably you could speak from your background and as well as from your region.
Thank you. I will share you with your Russian initiatives in the field of creating a safe internet for children and their education. And I believe that protecting children is primarily protecting them from destructive content and various dangers on the internet. And many children are subjected to abuse, deception, and bullying on the internet. And they need to be learned protection, not only from scammers, but also from peers who can bully them. And Russia has its own Cyrillic national domains focused on children's projects. This is domain.дети, children. This is the first Cyrillic domain for projects related to childhood. And I can tell you a little bit more our experience. Domain.дети is designed to promote the development of an informative, interesting, and safe internet for underage users, and to become a platform combining Russian language websites for children and parents. And the domain's mission.дети is to help improve the quality of internet used by children and teenagers by creating an internet space of trust. And that consolidates high quality and attractive, entertaining and educational internet content, and makes the stay of children and teenagers on the internet comfortable and safe. And the main task of the domain.дети is combining high quality and safe content on one platform. And to do this, a two-stage monitoring system is configured in the domain zones, which allows you to find and quickly eliminate threats. And so we are positioning .дети as a safe online space in which it's not scary to let a child go alone. And we also have the project study, The Internet Govern It, which is aimed at improving the digital literacy of children and teenagers. And since its launch, study, The Internet Govern It, has developed into a multi-platform combining various educational forms. So the basis of the project is an interactive portal with games, and with the help of which you can easily and effectively study the internet, the technologies that make it up, innovations, internet culture, rules for the safe use of personal data, artificial intelligence, smart technologies, and much more. As a part of this project, we conduct various quizzes, online tournaments, and an annual online championship for school children. And the project is more than 10 years old. It is useful for the development of digital literacy of children. Thank you. That's all.
Let me just get back in the room and ask Arevik for maybe more input on the question.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I will continue the ideas of Andrew. So when we speak about the ensuring child online safety, I think that one aspect of this big problem is the protection of minors from malicious contact, and the issue is beyond doubt. So harmful effects on minors in the internet can be expressed as follows. It's malicious content is malicious service interaction design, it's malicious communication, and online advertising. So in my opinion, they are the main areas that are now becoming the subject of regulation in the Russian Federation, but I think that it is the trend for all countries now. And if we speak about global prospects of national regulation, in my opinion, it's necessary now to develop a legislative framework at the national levels that will consolidate the status of the youth as a vulnerable group in the digital environment and establish the comprehensive protection, which will mean, in addition to providing access to the internet and information in the digital environment, ensuring respect for the privacy of children, prohibiting the discrimination in digital environment, and the formation of more a safer internet space for children. And at the moment, Russia mainly provides for a system of parental control, and the responsibility for what the child sees and reads practically lies in the hands of parents. And at the legislative level now, there are some discussion taking place on the possibility of adopting the requirement, the categorization of online content, including with regard to children, as well as requirements according to which service providers could have appropriate systems and processes to protect children from access to inappropriate content. And I think that it's also general trend for all countries.
Wow, that's quite interesting. From these conversations, and I would like to believe there are also people who have a bit more experience in looking at online child safety or with regard to internet access for children. Just maybe a quick take. Are there any suggestions? Let me bring it back to the audience. Are there any suggestions with regard to how we can actually improve or update current regulatory frameworks with regard to ensuring children are safe online? Any texts from the audience? It can be online or even in the room. Do you have any thoughts or suggestions with regard to how current frameworks that you may be aware of, or how you've looked at different laws or regulation on online child safety can be improved or updated? It can be from the people online or people in the meeting.
Okay,
Daria?
maybe I can take place. My name is Dara. I'm part of Net Mission Ambassador and Russian Youth Council for CCTLD. So for me, I think the main point here that most of the parents and older people doesn't really think that children need to be protected in online. This topic isn't discussed that much. Apparently in Russian legislative system, they just like my colleague just said, there's only parent control. So they don't really think they need to develop some laws in that part. So I think that's supposed to be discussed more, and so it's supposed to be, how do I put it? People have to really think about it. So maybe that's what's missing, at least for now.
All right, thank you. Any other thoughts? You can go ahead, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Ethan, and apparently I'm the old version, but I am the IGF Youth Ambassador for 2021. Yeah, but I just wanted to say in terms of regulation, that's one thing. So I won't add into the conversation in terms of what could be added to the current regulations. But what I can speak of is before we go into regulations and the effectiveness thereof, there's a prior conversation that is to be had around implementation, right? So in many countries, well, in some countries, we have data protection acts that speak to how data and privacy can be handled. Others don't. But one common theme that you find in most of these countries is there's still a lack of implementation on those laws. For example, the UK has the GDPR, which is considered as one of the strongest data protection acts, regulations around there. But in 2021, we saw TikTok being fined about 92 million for privacy concerns that children are. That affects children, and in 2022 they're being fined about 30 million. So we have the laws in some of these countries, most of these countries. Yes, laws are good, but I don't think the conversation should just be around the law itself. It should be what implementation measures do we have in place so that if we have a law, we can implement what the law says. If we don't have a law, we still, as we build for that law, we have the mechanisms that are strong enough to ensure that we have a secure digital space for online usage.
All right, let me get maybe thoughts or input in case from the online moderator. That's for Stella and Dalio, if there are any contributions from the online audience.
Right. Thank you, Levi. So I'll just go through some of the questions that we see online. So from the Internet Society Zambia, there's a question: how can we guarantee child online safety when adults are always busy in their professional agenda and leave their kids online unattended? And also a question from Judith on what are your opinions on age verification systems? Perhaps we could, any of the speakers, would you like to take these questions?
Okay, I don't know who would be up to take any of the questions. I think I'd like to get Aris on it because he made mention of something in that line. Or maybe you could just go over the question again, because I think I can't see it in the chat.
Okay. So that it's like there are two questions. First is how to guarantee online safety when adults are always busy in their professional agenda. Oh wow. Well, it really falls on the responsibility, and if you know, parents should be also be given awareness programs at the start, because if they will not be aware, a lot of, well, the past generation, sorry to say, that we cannot guarantee that they are really more versed on what technology is now, not unlike their kids. So it's really hard for them somewhat to comprehend on what their kids are doing. So at the end of the day, if they would be given something like a program, very simple, training program, or maybe just an awareness type of maybe a webinar, as simple as that, just to emphasize the things that what current technology has been doing and what its effects to their respective sons and daughters. Maybe that can lead to these particular parents to be more responsible in taking care and looking after their respective children. So it's really difficult as of this point. Just like what he mentioned earlier, there are really no implementation really with regards to what we really need to do. Well, we really need to start at the bottom level. That is it's really difficult as of this point. But that's only my opinion.
Jennifer, you want to make an addition?
Yes.
Maybe I'll take a little stab at the question about age verification systems. It's right now it's quite patchworked. I think if I'm speaking from the U.S. standpoint, a lot of these websites really try to do this and implement this because they're trying to not let minors look at things like gambling sites, things like alcohol, or adult beverage providers, things like tobacco, things like adult entertainment and porn, as well as things like movies that are rated above a certain rating for viewing. But the flip side also, I think the participant next to me has mentioned, is implementation. There's always this flip side is how are you going to verify somebody's age if you're trying to access a certain database, which would be a national database. There's always data breaches, and different standards for different jurisdictions exist right now. I think that is the million-dollar question. If we're able to find a verification that is international, of course, that would be ideal for, I guess, content providers, platform providers, and things like that. But even when you're looking at social media sites right now, you have to, when you go create an account, they ask you, are you above the age of 13? They don't really ask you to put in anything or any kind of like identification. It's kind of relying you on kind of an honor system. And that, for some content, that's fine. But for a lot of more extreme content, that is not fine. So I think the first step in trying to create something like that is to look at creating standards, creating secure standards that are able to access certain databases. But of course, there's always the data privacy laws, the regulations that go on in different jurisdictions. And then there's a whole other part that is quite interesting and problematic. If you're looking from the Asia Pacific standpoint and also other communities that are underserved, there are a lot of undocumented people, not just children, undocumented people in general. So how do you serve these people, these vulnerable, underserved communities, if you require them to go to certain government agency to get a certain ID? It becomes very problematic. You also have there's always the refugee population, which is also very vulnerable, and they are not documented either. So if you're looking at age verification, you have a whole gamut of issues ranging from data breach, data privacy, data regulations, to how to implement it. What type of content are you trying to stop people from looking at, and what type of audience are you trying to serve?
Wow, that's quite an interesting one. I don't know, we have two hands online. If possible, maybe we could get the questions in a row and then proceed to the next part of our conversation. We can start with Nicholas, and then I think there's another question from the Internet Society Zambia.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Nicholas. I'm an Internet Society Youth Ambassador, but I'm also a lawyer, and I've had some work to do within the area of online safety and cybersecurity. Now, I think that first of all, the good thing is that within the digital space, online child safety appears to be one of the things that there's some unanimity among nations that it is not good and there's need to address it. So in my view, it appears that the conversation on standards is one that should be had on high-stake platforms like this. If together as a people and countries, we can move towards establishing some minimum standards and norms as far as online child safety is concerned, it will make it much more easier for developers of applications to, by design, make it difficult to access some of these content. For instance, mention has been made of sexual abuse content, pornography, and the other things. Applications, for instance, may by design have inherent switches that enable parents indicate whether that device is going to be used or whether at the time of installing that application is going to be used by a child or otherwise. That way, it makes it easier for them to monitor who accesses what and what it is they are saying. But I also think that it may help if we don't box all children into one box, because as we are all aware, these days, children have access to technologies and digital devices very early as 3, 4, all the way up to 16, 15. And the sort of content you may not want a 5-year-old to be exposed to may not be the same content you may not want a 15 or a 16-year-old to be exposed to. So maybe stratifying the child demographic may help in terms of deciding which content is too bad for which and which is better for the other. My 2 pence. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Nicholas. Let's have the question or comment from the Internet Society Zambia chapter briefly.
All right.
Before we move to the next one.
So my name is Wilking Sikazoi from IGF Zambia. I think my first question is how feasible is it to actually, or how attainable is it? What possibilities do you actually attach to actually achieving the child safety on the internet? Because, for example, in third world countries like mine, which is Zambia, we have a very huge gap in terms of the digital immigrants and the digital natives. So inwardly, kids know more about the internet than parents. So you have a parent actually asking a child how to actually use a device. And then here we have no controls over who's using your device. A child can actually access pornography and other materials on my phone whilst I'm not there. So I think one of the alternatives would be, in consideration to the larger view, why not just have a creation of an internet for kids, where you would have restrictions of what is posted there, why, and basically it would be an internet for kids and tailored for kids. And then I feel most of the frameworks being provided are only achievable in countries that have, I think, achieved a certain level of internet, I think, performance. In countries like ours, we don't think those frameworks are actually implementable because I think we have a lot of digital literacy around, especially with adults. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So while he was speaking, Jennifer was actually appreciating the fact that you need to have more of a space just specifically for kids, right? And I don't know if this is the right time to ask Jennifer. You have www.kids. Would you like to explain a bit more?
Thanks, Levi, and thank you the intervention from Internet Society Zambia. I think that kind of just it's almost like I coordinated with him, but I haven't met him before that. But it is interesting that you mentioned there should be an internet space for kids, and that is exactly what Dot Kids is trying to build, because we know that there's multiple ways and multiple things that we need to do to keep children safe online. It's not just one thing, it's multiple things. But giving them a space that already tells you, okay, in this internet space, there will not be content that is questionable. It will not be pornography, will not be child sexual abuse materials, gambling, extreme violence, that kind of thing. Having that space available for kids to then explore and create their own content and learn things, and for schools to have that space there too. So that's one thing, that's one playground that's available for kids. But I'm not naive, and I think nobody around this table or online are naive to think that the children will only be on this certain space, right? It also requires educators, teachers, parents, and people who are around the children to keep that protection going on. Because I think there was a question earlier that Aris answered is like, how do we make sure they're safe if we just give them a device and leave the room? So the same analogy goes. You don't leave the room with a child with a knife, right? You do not do that, and I'm not saying that it's the same analogy of a device such as a phone or a laptop, but the potential of certain things that are abusive are important enough that you need education both from the child's standpoint as well as the people who are providing care for that child or that young person. And of course it would range from whenever the age will range, and then the kind of protections and the measures that need to be taken will also decrease or increase as appropriate.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Let me get a quick comment from Iris, and then we move to the last two parts of this session before we get feedback from the audience again.
Yeah, just a quick comment, and I do appreciate that what was mentioned by the Zambia chapter, and it crossed my mind. I did remember one thing that is very, very appropriate to kids and for them to be able to understand in the most simplest way on how they are going to deal with the internet. And I think Safer Internet had released a comic strip of how you're going to deal and how you're going to work around the internet. So it's like especially kids who would not want to read comic strips, right? Because that is the most simplest way to do it. Showing images and graphics and putting some conversations in a way we're in not just purely text, right? Let's go down to the level of the kids, because if we're going to show them those kind of materials, they will be more inclined in reading it. And I think if that would be implemented within the spaces that was being mentioned, which that would be as part of as a material, a reference material for them to be able to know what is not and what is necessary.
All right, thank you. So let me ask the second last question that I have from my end. When we talk about the whole lot of the frameworks, what needs to be done from the different stakeholders around the internet space, especially being biased towards having children safe online, my next question then is, what are some of the things that we need to consider in developing mechanisms to ensure that different stakeholders are fulfilling their responsibility with regard to child online safety. Let me start with you, Arevik.
So maybe I will answer in the different way. Okay, so I think that we need to make global efforts, and now we have no any international convention on the issue, and I think that here today at the IGF, at International Forum, I would like to speak about international level, yes? So returning to the issue of child protection on internet, it's important to note that ensuring the protection of children as a vulnerable group, it is urgent topic. And one of the examples of the initiatives in this direction, it is the initiative of 9 Russian largest digital companies. They have proposed an initiative to create alliance for the protection of children in the digital environment. And the main goal of this alliance for the protection of children in the digital environment is to create a child-friendly internet space, which will be based on creative and safe technologies and digital solutions that will allow children to develop harmoniously, meet the needs of the digital world, learn responsible behavior online, and form moral guidelines. And I think that it's important that the internet regulation should be carried not only at the legislative level from the top to the bottom, but also from the bottom to the up on the initiatives of IT companies and from the civil society. And I think that this initiative is a great example of this. Thank you.
All right, let me maybe throw this question back to the guys online before we get back to the two that are in the room. How do we ensure that we develop these mechanisms that ensure that almost all the stakeholders involved in the internet governance space are ensuring that they're fulfilling their responsibility with ensuring to child online safety? I'll push it back to Andre, Pavel, and Maurice. Can start with Andre. Your talk. Is Andre still in the room, or he has dropped off?
I think probably his maybe connection is bad.
Okay, Pavel, then Maurice.
Yeah, so I wanted to just add to what was just being spoken by from the questions that came in from the previous question. So, there's the children's use of the internet and their behavior and their vulnerabilities online differ according to their age. So to be effective, protection strategies need to incorporate measures and messages appropriate to different ages and levels of understanding. And this effective protection strategies require, obviously, children's participation. We're talking about children, and we need their input on what they think, could be a safer measures for them. We need their feedback as well. We can't just go around making strategies without consulting the people we're making the strategies for. And of course, particularly adolescents who I believe, have reached a certain age of understanding where their feedback can mean quite a lot, especially in terms of the design and implementation, as well as the empowerment of these kids. And of course, we talk about awareness so much. So obviously we have to empower the parents of these kids. We have to empower the adults who work closely with young people, the educators. We have to enable the support. They need support as well to understand this issue. We talk about the lack of understanding what what online safety is, and we need to use this information and communication technology and the risk of hazards that may encounter and prevent them. So I feel like everyone here needs to cooperate with each other, and we need to understand from the perspective and viewpoint of the people we're making these strategies for. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Pavel. Maurice, your take.
Thank you. It's as if though Pavel and Arvik was reading from my notes. I completely agree with everything that they have just shared, and I wanted to just add on as well. I, I love the saying that was developed at the IGF Poland last year as well, and I continue to say this in every space as well. A little less talk, a little more action, please. When we talk about action, I want to see that the cross-regional collaborations, for example, should continue to be consistent, and it should actually be increasing globally. I want to see there be a facilitation and coordination, as well as synergies and collaborations, in the work of both the government and civil society organizations when it comes to the promotion, when it comes to the protection and the fulfillment of the rights of our children. And then to round off, again, like our previous speakers have emphasized over and over in their various ways, we have to strengthen the capacity, we have to strengthen the systems and the processes that relate, to the realization of children's rights, and we need to bring everyone to the table. And I specifically thought about the voices of parents and also the awareness of parents. We cannot emphasize the importance of their involvement and the inclusion, more. It's critical, because your first point of contact for your development, as we know, for children are their caregivers. And I was grappling, as I was listening to everyone's contributions, with, are we developing the messaging for parents in a way that parents can receive? And I really think we should also work this into every aspect of developing frameworks and advocating for the best practices that come from these collaborative engagements. That when we're speaking to a specific audience, like we've been very intentional when it comes to children to come down to their level, as one of my previous colleagues have mentioned, and produce the content in a way that they can absorb. Are we doing the same for parents based on their level of understanding and where they are? So meeting them where they are too, and communicating with them in ways that will grab their attention. Being a parent is not easy. I'm a mother of one and soon to be a mother of two. I'm pregnant. So I know what it is to be overwhelmed with responsibilities. I know what it is to want to do the best for your child, but there's just so much that you need to get to, and you wear so many different hats. It's important that we are aware of this, and that we when we're speaking to parents, when we're trying to bring them to the table, that we are cognizant of the life of a parent, and also the life of a parent based on where they are, whether they be a parent in Europe, whether it be a parent in Africa. The lived experiences is completely different. And we need to bring this also to the fore when we want to keep parents accountable for making sure that their children kind of absorb what we want to bring across in terms of online safety for them. And yeah, there's so much that I could say, but for the sake of time, I will leave it there.
All right, let me ask Jennifer and Aris to just maybe, Aris, just maybe in 2 minutes or so to just share your thoughts on the same before we move to the last one.
Well, I've been telling everyone about awareness, and that is really the thing here. And more often than not, again, if I would go down further in maybe putting the challenge to each and every institution out there, being an academician, wherein you need to implement something that would make the students, even they are in the beginning stages, learning stages, to be aware of all the things that can harm them and all the things that they can do that can benefit them moving forward. And I think that would be the key for them to be able to work on something and prevent, protect themselves from any danger that they would be encountering in the future.
Well, so as my last question before I get comments and questions from the audience in this room and those online is, are social media companies or the big techs ensuring that they are accountable when it comes to online safety? Under a minute, if your answer is no, please give a solution on how we can make them accountable. If it's a yes, maybe you could give an understanding of course, how they're doing it. So in under a minute, I'll ask each speaker to just give their contribution. I'll start with those online. Pavel, you can go first. Andre, then Maurice. Then I'll get back to the room. Are social media companies or the big techs accountable when it comes to child online safety? Pavel.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Given the centrality of the private sector to the internet, especially these big tech companies and social media, it has major responsibilities in relation to child protection online. Social media companies have an obligation both to respect human rights and to seek to prevent or mitigate adverse human rights, which impacts directly linked to their operations. And not just their operations, but their products, their services, the advertisements they show, which is a byproduct of what people search online, especially what kids search online. So child abuse and exploitation are what I would say manifestly adverse human rights impacts, and social media companies should be held accountable. And just one more thing that I would like to add before we drop off. So obviously, the ads that are targeted for kids, we're talking about the data privacy of these kids. I feel like social media companies need to put something in place where they don't collect the data of children. As we know that these data is then stored and stored somewhere to then advertise certain games or products to these kids. So I guess there should be some kind of framework in place where parents at least have the knowledge of what kind of data of their children are being stored. And social media companies need to give us access to this knowledge as well. So that's it.
All right, thanks. Let me have Andre and Maurice under a minute each. Are social media companies or the big techs accountable when it comes to child online safety? Andre? Oh, okay. I've been told there's connection issues. Maurice, your tech?
Just really quickly, I agree with Pavel again. I couldn't have said it better myself. We know regulations around age verification, for example, really need to be clearer. Big tech is responsible, period. The issue with, for example, I just need big tech to come to the table more here is what I want to emphasize. And the issue, for example, with data on WhatsApp still being able to be interchanged between Telegram and Facebook is very problematic. And to be very clear, this includes the data of our children and our teenage users. Okay, so we need to call for transparency here on what is being shared, and also in terms of how long data is being kept online. Because yes, I've noticed there's been a good improvement in terms of images and data concerning your videos and those being removed. However, text is still often not deleted. So the right, for example, to be forgotten seems to have been forgotten. So big tech really needs to come to the table 100%.
All right, thanks. Let me get Arevik.
So thank you. For me, it's really a very interesting question, and I have made a lot of research on it. So in my scientific opinion, one of the best practices is represented by the UK. And I speak about the bill, which was mentioned today, the bill on internet safety. And it marks the first attempt to codify the regulation of online content. And it aimed to create legislative regime to combat illegal and harmful content on the internet. So the bill, which is currently under consideration, will establish the obligation for online platform to take care of the protection of their users, including child, and they should comply also with the codes of practice and ethics. And there is also will be a regulatory institution, Ofcom, and this body will controls the issue of online harm content. And so, in my opinion, in order to ensure the safety of children, it's necessary to introduce a responsibility for global platforms at the legislative level, using the example of this bill. So yes, online platforms have a code which they must moderate contact, but these codes doesn't work always good, and it's even possible to implement some artificial intelligence so that it monitors such content. But if we speak generally, I think that the main thesis is that responsibility should be comprehensive and all stakeholders should be responsible, including online platforms and social media. Thank you.
All right, let me just get a quick thought. I'll ask Jennifer to be the last. So let me have Aris. Social media companies, rather, really responsible when it comes to online child safety?
Good question. This will be very, very short. A big, huge, and absolute yes. Thank you.
Okay. Jennifer?
I will be as brief as Aris. I think panelists and speakers, both online and in the room, has already said everything that we all feel. They are very responsible, especially since the time that children and young people spend on these platforms. In fact, I guess Facebook, Meta now, and Google and all of these platforms, they do have safe search, they do have the technology, they do have the AI content filtering, they have actual humans looking at these too. They have all this, they have the resources. It's a disproportionate amount of resources that they have. Of course they can improve, and of course they should be at the table. In fact, if we do a follow-up workshop on this topic in any other internet governance fora or kind of RightsCon or anything like that, it would be very interesting to have them at the table, for them to listen to our concerns, for them to explain what are they doing, what steps are they improving on, and I think that's the kind of conversation we should have, especially here at IGF.
All right, thank you. Now, just before we wrap up, are there any comments? Maybe let me get two or one. Any comments or thoughts based on what we've looked at so far from the audience? Yeah.
Just a few thoughts. I think regarding how we're going to strengthen the responsibility of the different stakeholders on these matters, I think it's really important that we start with what we already have. So we do have, since last year, the General Comment number 25 on children's rights in relation to the digital environment. And I come from Brazil, and looking at the reality in Brazil of the legislators and the regulators, I don't see that document that was put out by the Committee on the Rights of the Child being implemented. So I think we really need to think on how we're going to monitor the implementation of this sort of these parameters. I'm sorry, and also cooperate with different stakeholders from different countries to make sure that they are being implemented everywhere. About the responsibility of big techs, I think they're responsible, and that's that. But I think a lot of the harms that come from those products and the usage of those products by children, they come from the very business models of those companies. So I don't think we can stop on making them comply with certain parameters. We really need to take a step further and think on how we're going to endorse the development of alternatives to those applications that are on their very core harmful. And for doing that, we really need to get children involved and understand what their needs are, what it is about those applications that make them so attractive to children. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to develop alternatives that are going to be attractive to them. So.
All right, thank you. Let me just have one more comment. Oh, two. Okay, yeah, the last two then. Please speak under a minute each, and then we can wrap up. I'll start with Ethan, then I'll come back to you, Ma.
Yeah, mine will be brief. I think to the question of what we can do to make sure big tech is, comes to the party is basically, I think we have to address what they care about most, and that is they care about making money. And so, yeah, our solutions should be around how we can ensure that if they do, if they don't take care of the issues that they should be around child safety, then we are hitting them where it hurts. Finding TikTok 30 million when they're worth 58 billion is nothing to them. They'll make that in a week. So I think that's where the issue is, and if we can address that, then they will comply.
All right, thank you. The last comment.
Hi, my name is Ezine from Nigeria. So I want to speak from someone from a developing country. I think that we need to create more awareness. How do we do this? We need to educate the parents, educate the children, and most importantly, communicate the punitive measures to the predators. If we focus only on the children and the parents, the predators will keep improving with their antics. So I think we need to, put more emphasis on the punitive measures and create more awareness because from where we come from, some of us come from, we are grappling with so many things. But then this is a universal issue. And I also think that maybe we need to transcend from policy to action and implementation. And lastly, I think we also need to lay more emphasis. We have special days, we recognize special days for some things. Online safety for children is a universal issue. So I think we need to create more awareness, lay more emphasis, find a day where we would talk more about it and continue the discussion even beyond IGF in our various smaller communities. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for participating, for taking time to just be part of this conversation. So in closing, these three things have come up often. Let's all be ensuring that we are creating awareness, number one. Secondly, ensuring that we push for implementation of some of the things that we are advocating for. Because without implementation, we still get back to this conversation of what needs to be done without necessarily having them achieved. Then lastly, we still need to take action from all ends, regardless of the sector that we're coming from, and we seriously need to ensure that. So as a way of concluding, I want to say thank you once again for being part of the conversation. I wish you a great interaction at the Internet Governance Forum for the rest of the sessions left. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Oh, I forgot one more thing, sorry. Apologies. I would actually like to say thanks to the team that has coordinated this. Special thanks to Stella, Bea, Dalio, Daria, and Pio for being the background people online. But utmost special thanks to the participants and the speakers, as well as the team that coordinated this. Yeah. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you. It was great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Levi, for moderating.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pulling it all together. I'd just like to add something.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's okay. It's okay. Jennifer.